For 6 months, I have been on a journey. One of pain, of suffering, I don't know how many more I have in me, of despair, please, and of elation. Yes! This is the run! 56 attempts, 55 failures. This is how I beat Terraria Calamity Mod hardcore. Loading into the world on the 56th run, my initial objective is the same as many runs before it, to reach the Sulphurous Sea as quickly as possible. Before I do that though, I set up some quick NPC housing and pillar up in search of the main planetoid and the Arsenal lab inside. These chests contain some items that will be necessary much later on, but for now I'm most interested in the gold and the herb bags. Using the gold, I buy 50 dynamite from the demolitionist that I'll be using to craft an instivator once I get a few fallen stars. In the meantime, I start bridging across the world to the Sulphurous Sea to avoid potentially having to run through the Crimson. I loot a floating island and get a hold of a celestial magnet, which honestly is about the last thing I wanted to see from this chest. In any case, I continue expanding the platform into the night until I collect 3 fallen stars, which I immediately use to craft the instivator I mentioned earlier. With this, I pop a Spelunker potion and begin exploring underground, finding several life crystals and enough emeralds for an emerald hook. Heading back down, I find a few more life crystals and enough diamonds to craft both a diamond staff and immediately upgrade to a diamond hook. Now comes what will probably be the most controversial part of this run. The Combat Expert added by Prisma's Pristine Potions adds an item called the Shimmer Mirror that is obtained by trading a magic mirror for it. It does exactly what you'd expect. If I were to do this run now, I would not use this item until after I had found the shimmer, but in my head locating the shimmer doesn't really pose any risk and just takes time, which is why I did this, as I wanted to get through pre-hard mode as quickly as possible. That said, I am fully aware how this could be considered cheating by some, and I'll refrain from using it in any future hardcore runs until after I've found the biome. I now have everything I need and I finished bridging over to the Sulphurous Sea. If you're very familiar with the Calamity mod, you probably know exactly why I'm here. If not, I'll explain. In the Sulphurous Sea, an enemy called the Trasher spawns. If the angler has not yet been found in the world, he will drop out of a Trasher when it's killed. If the angler is killed by a Trasher, he will drop a golden fishing rod. What I'm doing here is called Trasher stacking, where getting 2 Trashers together and killing one will cause the angler to drop, who is then immediately killed by the second for a guaranteed golden fishing rod. While this interaction is not directly responsible for making the upcoming progression skip possible, it certainly makes it a lot easier. Using my new rod, I fished for some time, although all I really needed was the Reaver Shark. In vanilla, the Reaver Shark was nerfed in 1.4 to no longer be capable of mining Hellstone, but this nerf is reverted in Calamity. What this means is that Hellstone is obtainable pre-boss. After mining enough Hellstone to craft everything I need at the moment, I make a full set of Molten Armor, the Volcano, and the Cauldron. Back at the Sulphurous Sea, I extended my safe house in an attempt to find a spot where my pylon would work. I still have no idea why I had to do this, but if it works, it works. After fishing for about 20 minutes, I sold my haul so I could buy 30 stacks of any potions I thought would be useful. I replaced my chests with a magic storage system, which is definitely one of my favorite quality of life mods. A few minutes later, while working on an arena, I felt an evil presence watching me. The Eye of Cthulhu was no real match for my Hellstone gear, so it went down without much trouble. Now is probably a good time to talk about bosses. In many Calamity Challenge runs, people will fight every boss on tier in order. For example, pre-hard mode bosses might be fought in this order: King Slime, Desert Scourge, Eye of Cthulhu, Crabulon, Eater of Worlds or Brain of Cthulhu, Hivemind or Perforators, Queen Bee, Deerclops, Skeletron, Slime God, then Wall of Flesh. I will not be doing this. While I will be killing most bosses on tier and in order, there are a few, mostly pre-hard mode, that I will kill out of order. In the Crimson, I broke a few hearts to try my hand at the Brain of Cthulhu. I usually fight this boss on the surface, and I was clearly struggling with the limited space, as I had to recall to avoid dying and losing the run. Killing a few goblin scouts got me the tattered cloth I needed to craft a goblin battle standard, so I summoned the goblin army. Getting access to the goblin tinkerer as soon as possible is a high priority, as the power boost he allows for will make the next few bosses a breeze. As always, the goblins are a pushover and I make it through their invasion with no trouble. I find the tinkerer after only about 3 minutes of searching, and buy a tinkerer's workshop and rocket boots. I immediately upgrade my boots all the way to Terra Spark and reforge everything to warding. I always use warding because I am not good at this game, so I need all the survivability I can get. Back over in the Crimson, I craft a bloody spine and make a quick arena. This time the brain is not a threat and it goes down no problem. Next up is King Slime, followed shortly by the Perforators. None of the early bosses are much of a threat due to my Hellstone gear, but this will change once I enter hard mode. Using the blood samples dropped from the Perforators, I crafted the Bloodbath and headed to the dungeon to fight Skeletron. Skeletron was a pushover as usual. Heading into the dungeon, there's really only two things I care about: a Cobalt Shield and a Shadow Key. I'm mentally prepared to spend half an hour down here, but opening the first golden chest, I'm met with exactly what I was looking for. With the Perforators defeated, Aerolite ore is now mineable, so I collect a few islands worth. Skyline wings are a welcome upgrade over the fledgling wings I've been using, and the bundle of horseshoe balloons will be duct taped to my body for the foreseeable future. I also crafted the Broken Biome Blade, which I will barely use as I ended up pivoting to Summoner upon entering hard mode. After getting my hands on the last blighted gel needed to craft the overloaded sludge, I place a few heart lanterns and bottled stars around the arena for some more buffs before fighting the Slime God. This has always been one of my best bosses regardless of difficulty, so it goes down without issue. Down in the underground desert, I get the materials I need to summon the Desert Scourge, which I am so overpowered for at this point that I don't even bother making an arena. I craft the Fractured Arc and the Night's Edge, one of which is hardly used at all and the other of which is used only until I get a few decent summons. With everything I cared to do in pre-hard mode complete, all that was left was to kill the Wall of Flesh. I opted to use my mage loadout for this fight since I really don't like getting close enough to the wall for my melee weapons to be useful. This boss put up a bit more of a fight, getting me to below half towards the end thanks to me jumping into a few lasers, but it went down and I have officially entered hard mode. Most runs made it to this point though. The real challenge begins now. As I hope is obvious, I put a lot of time and effort into making this video, so if you are enjoying it, consider liking or subscribing to the channel. I hope to start putting out more videos now that this is done, so keep an eye out for those. For whatever reason, my first thought upon entering hard mode was that I should go kill the Queen Bee. This is another pre-hard mode boss, so you know how this goes. My first actual hard mode objective is to collect enough spider fangs for a full set of spider armor and both spider summons, alongside the caustic staff. The pygmy necklace is also a nice upgrade, so I buy one from the witch doctor. After taking out a wyvern for some souls of flight, and gathering a few souls of light, I make angel wings. In the Calamity mod, all vanilla wings are buffed to have different effects. The angel wings, for example, provide 20 max life, 10 defense, and 1 health per second life regen. The next summon I need is dropped by Dread Nautilus, a mini-boss summoned by fishing during a blood moon. After getting the other fishing enemies far too many times, I eventually fish up what I'm looking for, and it drops the Sanguine Staff on my first kill, which summons a Sanguine Bat minion that stays by the player until an enemy is in sight. While I was fishing, I got my hands on a few Mirage crates, one of which gave me a magic conch. This was the last ingredient I needed to craft the shell phone, which is a nice upgrade to save a few inventory slots. Next up is the final summon I'll get before taking on my first hard mode boss, the Ancient Ice Chunk. This is dropped by ice claspers in the underground tundra, and it doesn't take long to get one. This is a great summon for crowd control and worm bosses, since it attacks by dashing at enemies and can hit plenty of segments in quick succession. I'm sure you can see where I'm going with this. Back at base, I craft the mechanical worm and get right to fighting the destroyer. This boss is usually not a huge issue, and that holds true for this run. I do get hit by the head right at the end due to carelessness, but the destroyer is already so low that all it takes is another second of my minions doing their thing, and the first boss of hard mode falls. Now you may have noticed that a ton of my NPCs died, but no tombstones dropped. Before anyone makes a big deal out of this, the reason they didn't drop tombstones is because I have tombstone drops disabled entirely with the Tomb Tweaks mod. I craft the Cryo Key and set up a bit of an arena in the tundra to fight Cryogen later. I remember now that I should probably go on a life fruit gathering spree to max out my health. One jungle trip and impromptu Queen Bee fight later, and I've downed 20 life fruits and thrown one, alongside a life crystal because I forgot to do that earlier, into the shimmer. While searching for a voltaic jelly to craft yet another summoner accessory, I decide to kill the giant clam, a mini-boss in the sunken sea. This drops mollusk husks, which I'll use to craft an armor set that I'll try for about 10 minutes before deciding I don't like it. For now though, I'm still searching for that voltaic jelly, so I spend another few minutes down here until I eventually get my hands on one. The jelly charged battery is strictly better than the pygmy necklace, so I swap them out. Down in the dungeon, I get my hands on a bewitching table for an extra minion slot. You may notice that I'm wearing mollusk armor here. This is the armor set I mentioned about 25 seconds ago. In the end, I opted to stick with my spider armor for the time being. Before fighting Cryogen, I decided to take a trip to the Sulphurous Sea to take down the aquatic Scourge. This is another worm boss, so it's an ancient ice chunk victim. That boss had actually ended the previous run. Yes, I really did lose a run to Aquatic Scourge, so it was nice to exercise those demons this time around. With that detour complete, it's time to get back onto the main quest line. Cryogen is next up, and as usual, he's mostly a damage sponge. This is my least favorite boss fight aside from Deerclops, but I never fight Deerclops on tier anyways, so this one is the most annoying in any given playthrough. Either way, Cryogen goes down, and I can stop talking about this fight. Some crystal shard duping is in order, as I need money to buy Aquatic Scourge treasure bags, so I don't have to risk refighting it. From the treasure bag I get the Deep Sea Staff, another strong weapon for my arsenal that summons an aquatic starfish to dash at enemies. Above the Brimstone Crag, I set up some NPC housing to expand my pylon network. I'm here at the crag for Infernal Swavite, a key ingredient for Unholy cores, which I'll be using to craft the summoner for another boss very soon. For now though, it's time to take on the twins. There's not much to say about this fight, it's probably the easiest mech boss in my opinion, so they fall and leave Skeletron Prime as the last mech standing. After Cryogem was defeated, Cryonic Ore became available to mine in the underground tundra, so after a quick mining session, I returned to base and make enough Cryonic bars to craft a full set of Daedalus armor, alongside the Daedalus Golem staff, which summons golems that shoot pellets and electricity. Using my new summon, I take to the underground jungle to farm moss hornets for a tattered B-wing. I don't get one, but thankfully I can craft one using a moss hornet banner. B-wings, along with having better speed and much better flight time than angel wings, also provide the honey buff permanently. Before I finish off the mech trio, there's another boss I want to take on first. The Charred Idol, crafted using the Unholy cores I got earlier, is the summoning item for the Brimstone Elemental. Despite me taking a few hits for no reason, it's not enough to make this fight close. This attempt is my first time ever going full summoner across vanilla or modded Terraria, and around this point is when I started to realize that this class is insanely broken. The Elemental's treasure bag contained yet another summon, the Dormant Brimseeker. I craft the Eye of Desolation, the summoner for Calamitous Clone, but I won't be using it just yet. Instead, it's time to take down the last of the mechs. Skeletron Prime is all about destroying the arms early and keeping your distance from the head. As it turns out, playing Summoner makes that quite easy. With all 3 mechs down, I now have access to hollowed bars and several items that require the 3 mech souls. The first item I make with them is the Durandal, since I've been using the Firecracker ever since I defeated the Wall of Flesh and I'm due for an upgrade. With all 3 mech souls, I craft the Vengeful Sun Staff, a summon weapon that is a direct upgrade from the Sun Spirit Staff available in Pre-Hardmode that summons a solar spirit above the player's head, and upgrade my Terraspark boots into Angel Treads. Hallowed Armor is the final new craft before the next boss. The Cryogenic Staff is a sentry bought from the Archmage after all mech bosses have been defeated, and it will prove to be useful far beyond this point. I also swap out the first Shadow Flame for the Honeydew, as I sometimes struggle with this fight and I like the extra survivability. With every upgrade out of the way, I summon Calamitous Clone. I'm glad I equipped the Honeydew, as this was the first boss in some time to get me below half health, but in the end it goes down and the run continues. The treasure bag gave me what I was hoping for, the Entropy's Vigil, a summon weapon that summons a mini Calamitous clone and her brothers. I'm pretty much ready for Plantera at this point, so I add some platforms to the arena in the jungle and summon her. With Plantera down, a few new items are unlocked via living shards. One such item is the Plantation Staff, a new summon. For this though, I'll need to backtrack a bit. The Blade Staff required for the recipe is dropped by Queen Slime, and the Eye of Night requires the Staff of... however you pronounce that, which is dropped by Dark Casters, a Pre-Hardmode dungeon enemy. You might have noticed that I have spent very little time in the dungeon, meaning that I do not have this on hand and I will have to sit in the dungeon grinding mobs until I get one to drop. This would have been much less tedious in Pre-Hardmode where Dark Casters are everywhere, but alas I am now post-Plantera and as such, the dungeon is full of other enemies occupying each spawn attempt. An item I could have crafted post-max but forgot about until just now is the Blood Orange, which permanently increases maximum life by 25. I also use some living shards to craft the Living Dew and upgrade to the Honey Dew. Now it's time for a long trip to the dungeon. Approximately 27 minutes and 24 seconds later, I have what I came here for and I recall out of there. I still need the other components for the Eye of Night though, so I quickly make the Belladonna Spirit Staff and the Imp Staff, and grab the Scab Ripper that I crafted earlier. With the Eye of Night in hand, it's time to take out Queen Slime for the other component of the Plantation Staff. I'm fully overgeared for this fight by now, so she goes down with no issue. I don't get what I want at first though, and it ends up taking 5 fights before I finally obtain the Blade Staff. With everything in hand, I return home and finally craft the Plantation Staff, adding a mini Plantera to my arsenal. Also, while I was in the dungeon, I got my hands on the Morning Star, an upgrade over the Durandal, not to be confused with the Morning Star. Before fighting the next boss, Leviathan and Anahita, I upgraded my Ankh Shield into the Asgard's Valor. I also purchased the Tiki Armor and Leaf Wings from the Witch Doctor. The Leaf Wings, when wearing the Tiki Armor, grant 5 defense, 5% damage reduction, and permanent Dryad's Blessing. I could also now craft Status's Blessing, a powerful summon accessory. First though, I needed a Necromantic Scroll. One short Pumpkin Moon later and I can craft the Papyrus Scarab, which is then combined along with a few materials and other summon accessories into Status's Blessing, providing 2 max minions, 12% increased summon damage, and increased minion knockback. Deep in the underground jungle, I unlock the temple and make the altar room fit for a golem fight. But before fighting him, I first head back to the ocean and summon the Leviathan and Anahita. This fight is always tough for me and I get down to around half health multiple times, but I pull through. The treasure bag drops the Gastric Belcher Staff, a new weapon that summons aquatic aberrations to shoot vomit and bubbles at nearby enemies. With my army improved yet again, I make my way back to the temple altar and summon Golem. Golem is, as is the case in most playthroughs, a complete pushover, so he goes down easily. The next summon on the agenda is the Wither Blossom Staff, which just requires some Plague Cell canisters from the underground jungle. The Miracle Fruit is my next craft, which functions identically to the Blood Orange from earlier, increasing my maximum life by 25. Now it's time for new armor. I need Scoria bars for this, but I despise the Abyss and will never go there if I can avoid it, so instead of mining the ore normally, I fish for crates instead. Once I have enough, I craft the Hydrothermic armor and, since I'm not wearing the Tiki armor anymore, I switch over to the Steampunk wings. The Martian Invasion, an event that I skip in a decent chunk of my playthroughs, is next on the agenda. The Xenostaff is what I'm after, and I get one from the first saucer. About 45 gold gets me a Rod of Discord from the Wizard, which I am very bad at remembering to use, but I always buy one anyway in the hopes that I'll learn. With my upgrades complete, the next boss on the list is Astrum Aureus. I dislike this boss as it feels like a damage sponge, but I can't complain about another successful boss attempt. With Astrum Aureus down, the Starbuster core can drop in the underground astral infection, so I get my hands on one of those. This can be combined with a few other summoner accessories to make the Star Tainted Generator, which provides 2 max minions, 7% increased summon damage, immunity to irradiated, and causes minion attacks to spawn astral explosions and inflict debuffs. The Community is an accessory dropped by Leviathan and Anahita that gets stronger the more bosses have been defeated in the world. Since I've defeated most bosses up to this point, I decide to buy treasure bags until I get it. With my new accessories equipped, I use the Death Whistle I crafted earlier to summon the Ravager. This boss is similar to Golem, but is much more threatening. This is the first fight of the run that looked cooked for a moment, with me taking a lot of very avoidable damage that could have ended my run had I made just a couple more mistakes. In the end though, I managed to stabilize and take it down. A second treasure bag gets me the Blood Pact, an accessory that increases max life by 25% and increases healing potion effectiveness by 25%. This accessory and eventually its upgrades will remain glued to my person for the remainder of the run. In the Hollow, I grab a Prismatic Lacewing and summon the Empress of Light. What I'm hoping for from the treasure bag is the Kaleidoscope and the Terra Prisma. Now before you say the Terra Prisma only drops from Daytime Empress, Calamity changes it to be a regular drop in exchange for some pretty heavy nerfs. I didn't get either though, which means it's time to buy some treasure bags. Once I've gotten what I want, I head to the jungle to expand my arena there, and summon the Plaguebringer Goliath. This boss is like a late hard mode mech equivalent of the Queen Bee, and it also happens to be one of the bosses I struggle with the most. I once again dropped below half during this fight, but the Goliath was already low enough that I just needed to survive a few more seconds to close it out. This boss also drops a summon weapon, that being the Fuel Cell Bundle, that summons mini Plaguebringers that shoot missiles at nearby enemies. It also drops another summon called the Infected Remote, but I don't really like that one, so I don't use it. With that out of the way, it's time to start the final stretch towards post-Moonlord, starting with the Cultist. Despite me hitting the wrong clone both times, I take it down and the Celestial Pillars begin. Before doing those, however, I upgrade my Living Dew into the Ambrosial Ampule and take down the Old One's army, culminating in a pretty one-sided fight with Betsy. You may wonder why I even bothered fighting Betsy if I didn't get a weapon or anything, and the answer is just so that it's checked off on the boss checklist. With that little detour taken care of, it's time to start the pillars. This is probably my least favorite part of any Terraria run, so I won't spend much time talking about it. First up is the Stardust Pillar, after which I craft Status's Curse, a strong upgrade to Status's Blessing, then the Vortex Pillar, then Solar. Before doing Nebula, I pivot to fighting Astrum Deus. I didn't even realize this until just now watching the footage back to write this script, but I fought Deus immediately upon joining the world and completely forgot to summon my minions. That explains why the fight was 6 minutes long as opposed to the 1 or 2 minute fights I've had up to this point, but it also proves that Deus really is a fraud. After defeating Astrum Deus, I crafted the Eye of Magnus, which is a classless weapon that reduces enemy defense and heals health and mana on hit. This will become a staple of my loadout for the remainder of the run. In order to clear space for the upcoming fights, I destroyed the giant planetoid before heading over to finish off the lunar events. With the Nebula Pillar down, I waited for Moonlord to spawn. This is the main fight that the Rod of Discord is for, as I much prefer to just teleport past the giant laser. For whatever reason, Moonlord's health bar at the bottom is bugged to show him having way more HP than he does, so he actually dies when it gets to half. With this victory, I have officially made it to the final phase of Calamity, post-Moonlord. By now, this run has made it farther than about 90% of my attempts, and I can feel the pressure starting to build. First order of business, upgrades. First comes the Celestial Tracers, an upgrade to my Angel Treads that also counts as wings. Then the Flowers of Mortality and Elemental Axe, 2 new summons. Next up is Stardust Armor, followed by the Tactical Plague Engine, another new summon. This one summons a plague jet that fires bullets from your inventory, so I make an endless luminite pouch so I never run out of ammo. The first boss of Post Moonlord is the Profane Guardians, the boss responsible for what I'm pretty sure is the most deaths I've ever had on a boss in my Master Infernum run. I don't recommend watching that video, by the way, as I high-key used Fargo's accessories for Escal and Exos, which makes the whole run fraudulent looking back on it. Either way, I'll be running Master Infernum again at some point in the future to right that wrong. For now though, the Guardians are down. I then decided to craft the Absorber before moving on to the hardest boss of the run. After coming to terms with the fact that this run might end right here, I head down to the underground mushroom biome and summon Crabulon. For real though, I completely forgot about this guy until just now, so I wanted to get it done for both the boss checklist and for that tiny buff to the community. The next actual boss is Providence, because I forgot about Dragon Folly. This proves to not be a huge deal, as despite taking me down to about half health at one point, Providence falls. With her down, Eulabloom ore generates in the underground jungle, so I go on a quick gathering spree before crafting a few upgrades. These include an elderberry, another 25 max life increase, a set of Tarragon armor, and the Virid Vanguard. A new weapon that summons blades to circle the player. From another Providence bag, I got the Dazzling Stabber Staff, and from a random enemy in Hell after beating Providence, I got the Guidelight of Oblivion, 2 new summons. Remembering Dragon Folly, I head to the jungle to make another arena and summon it. Despite my loadout being geared towards survivability, I still do ridiculous damage, and after a little over a minute, the fight is over. The Rune of Kos is the next boss summon item, used to summon the Sentinels of the Devourer. These are the 3 bosses that drop materials for the Devourer of Gods summoning item. I opt to take on Cygnus first, who is fought in the Underworld. I struggled with this one more than usual in this run, dropping below half before I finished it off. Using 3 of the Twisting Nether dropped from Cygnus, I crafted the King of Constellations, Tenryu, a new summon weapon that uses 4 minion slots to summon a pair of celestial dragons. The second sentinel I fight is Stormweaver, summoned in space. I take some very avoidable damage early into phase 2, but by the nature of this being a worm boss, it melts very quickly once the armor is gone. The third and final of the trio is Ceaseless Void, fought in the dungeon, so I transform the big room at the bottom into an arena and summon it. I almost threw this fight insanely hard, getting caught in a corner at half HP, but I managed to stick it out with the help of the multiple survivability accessories I had equipped. There's actually 2 more bosses before the Devourer of Gods. First is Poltergeist, also fought in the dungeon. This one is extremely tanky, so it takes over 3 minutes to go down, but despite that, it's definitely one of the easier post-Moonlord bosses. The main attraction from this boss is the Affliction, an accessory that gives 0.5 health per second life regen, 10% max life, 7% damage reduction, 13 defense, and 10% increased damage. Poltergeist also drops Ruinous Souls, a key component in Blood Flare armor, so I make a set before heading off to fight the last boss before the Devourer, Old Duke. Despite me getting caught out by a few dashes, the Duke goes down and all that's left is to grab a few more weapons from his treasure bag. These include the Cadaverous Carrion and the Mutated Truffle. The former places an Old Duke hat on the ground that spits sharks, while the latter summons a Fishron that cycles between different attacks and takes up 3 minion slots. A quick side quest sees me obliterate Deerclops and Duke Fishron before it's finally time to take on the dog. By this point, I had lost 4 runs to the Devourer. None had gotten past. I'm solid enough at the final 2 bosses that winning here and beating Yaron means I'd have a decent chance at closing out the run. All I need to do is lock in, right here, right now. Yes! This is the run! Oh my god. This is the run. This is the run. With the Devourer of Gods defeated, the Pumpkin Moon, Frost Moon, and Solar Eclipse will begin dropping Nightmare Fuel, Endothermic Energy, and Dark Sun Fragments respectively. Before I can craft anything with those, I need a new crafting station, the Cosmic Anvil, made with Cosmolite bars dropped by the Devourer. With all these new materials, I craft the Chalice of the Blood God, a combination of the Blood Pact and Charm of Myths, the Nucleogenesis, the direct upgrade to the Star-Tainted Generator and Status's Curse, the Fearmonger Armor, the Corvid Harbinger Staff, the direct upgrade to the Raven Staff, and the Asgardian Aegis, the direct upgrade to the Asgard's Valor and the Elysian Aegis. I then take out the Hive Mind for the checklist before turning my Jungle Arena into the Hollow. Because I fought Providence in the Underworld, she dropped the Elysian Aegis, which was what I wanted at the time. Now though, I need the Elysian Wings for a certain crafting recipe, which requires killing Providence in the Hollow. I'm over-geared for her by now, so she falls in about a minute. With the wings in hand, I return home to craft the Elysian Tracers. I also upgrade the Staff of the Frost Hydra into the Endo Hydra Staff, and craft the Mirror of Calandra. This is a weapon that summons 5 ancient weapons, each taking up a minion slot. The first of 2 new accessories is the Dark Sun Ring, which grants increased damage, 2 minion slots, and increased minion knockback, alongside extra buffs depending on whether it's day, night, or an eclipse. The second is the Sponge, which provides a barrier that absorbs up to 180 damage and grants 30 defense and 10% damage reduction while active. Before fighting Yaron, I expand my arena a decent amount and get rid of a few planetoids that might get in my way. The final 3 bosses are finally up. First, Yaron. This is by far the closest I've come to dying in this entire run. I thought it was so over that I said to myself during the fight, I'm dead, the run is dead. But against all odds, I clutched up in the final stretch. This fight might not have been this close if I had just worn the damn sponge, but for whatever reason I used the Dark Sun Ring instead. Then again, maybe the extra damage from the ring was the difference maker. I'll never know. What I do know is that at this point, I began to panic a bit. You see, I am not a summoner player, and because I am not a summoner player, I have been using the Calamity Wiki's class setups page whenever I played it for an attempt. This became an issue when I looked at the wiki page for the Lilies of Finality. One of the minions listed for Exos and Supreme Calamitas is the Lilies of Finality, which can only be found in the Brimstone Crag post-Yaron, always placed in a structure with walls. You may have noticed that my Brimstone Crag was almost completely destroyed by the double obsidian instabridge I placed all the way back in Pre-Hardmode. What this means is that these structures no longer exist, and there is no longer any way to obtain this minion on this world. Now yes, I realize that this is entirely my fault for using the instabridge, which is why I did not go to another world to get it. However, this means that I will be without it for the final 2 bosses, which I really didn't love the prospect of. Could I have hard swapped my loadout to something like melee? Yes. Did I want to? No. I made this mistake, and I was going to live or die by it. With all that being said, it was time to begin preparing for Supreme Calamitas. I opted to fight her first because I find her fight easier than the Exo mechs, and defeating her allows access to some very nice upgrades to take on the Exos. My first objective was crafting the Dragon Fruit, which is the final health increasing consumable. With Yaron down, auric ore had generated, so I went on a quick mining spree to get enough for everything I'd need. The first auric bar craft was the auric Tesla armor, a combination of the Silva, Blood Flare, and Tarragon armors. Using the Wings of Rebirth dropped by Yaron, I crafted the Seraph Tracers, and using the Ambrosial Ampule and Infected Jewel, I made the Radiance. I hadn't been putting the Codebreaker together at all during this run, so I quickly ran through all the labs that I hadn't been to and began assembling the machine. I also used an item from Fargo's Mutant mod to reveal the map, because at this point it doesn't really matter and I like being able to see everything. Buying another Devourer of God's treasure bag gave me the Staff of the Mech Worm, which is what I was after, and I crafted the Altar of the Accursed. With preparation done, it was time to fight one of the final bosses, Supreme Calamitas. One more. You may think that beating Supreme Calamitas means that I have beaten Calamity. Technically though, her and Exomechs are on the same tier of progression, so I have to beat both to say that I've truly won. With Escal down, she moved in as a town NPC, and now allows access to the enchantment mechanic. I'll be using this on just 2 items. These are 2 of the 5 items with access to the Exhumed enchantment, which transforms them into a completely new item. The first of these is the Community, which becomes the Shattered Community. This has the effects of a maxed out community alongside empowering Rage Mode by up to 25%. For my purposes though, it's pretty much just a maxed out community because I haven't stacked any Rage Mode boosts on it. The second item is the Staff of the Mech Worm, which becomes the Metastasis. This summons a full-sized Sepulture, the worm-looking enemy that Supreme Calamitas summons during her fight. While it is summoned, Brimstone Hearts appear around the player that can cause the Sepulture to enrage, attacking the player. This only happens after there are more than 2 hearts present though, and the hearts can be destroyed by attacks or by other minions. With those upgrades out of the way, the final fight is upon us. When summoning the Exomechs, Draydon allows the player to choose one mech to spawn first. I chose Ares. Yes! Oh my god. My fucking heart. Yes! Holy man! Now, I am far from the first person to beat Calamity hardcore. I'm unsure how many people have done it, but I do know that at least like 5 different people have beaten Infernum hardcore, so this really isn't all that crazy in the grand scheme. That said, I'm happy with this run. This was my first time beating hardcore Terraria since I did a hardcore vanilla run long before I even started this channel. If this video gets a million billion likes, I'll do Infernum hardcore. With all that out of the way, thank you so much for watching and sticking it out until the end. It really does mean the world to me, and I hope you enjoyed it. As always, have an amazing day.